Nobody in the town of Black Hollow could explain the horse's behavior. Every single morning before sunrise, the old chestnut stallion would leave the pasture, walk across the ranch alone, and stand in front of a dusty wooden box hidden deep inside the abandoned barn. He didn't eat there. He didn't sleep there. He simply stood guard. Motionless. Silent. Watching anyone who came close with sharp, warning eyes. And the strangest part. The horse had once been wild. People said he used to kick down fences, bite handlers, and throw every rider who tried to tame him. Yet somehow, after years of chaos, he became completely devoted to one thing: protecting that old box no one cared about. At first, ranch workers laughed about it. It's probably empty. Maybe rats live in there. Maybe the old horse finally lost his mind. But after what happened that autumn evening, nobody laughed again. Because when the box was finally opened, the truth inside shook the entire ranch to its core. And before we continue, if stories about horses, loyalty, and unbelievable true mysteries move you the way they move us, make sure to like and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered forever. The wind rolled softly across the dry Montana hills as Ethan Cole stepped out onto the porch of his late father's ranch. The land looked endless under the orange sunrise, but to Ethan, it felt emptier every day. 3 months earlier, his father Walter had died unexpectedly from a heart attack, leaving Ethan with a ranch drowning in debt, broken fences, unpaid workers, and more painful memories than he could handle. Ethan hadn't wanted to come back. He'd spent 15 years avoiding this place. Avoiding the arguments. Avoiding the silence. Avoiding the feeling that his father had always loved the horses more than him. But now there he was again. 38 years old. Divorced. Broke. Standing on the same porch where he once dreamed of escaping forever. A distant neigh echoed across the field. Ethan looked toward the northern pasture and saw the chestnut stallion standing near the old barn again. Dusty. That was the horse's name. The massive horse stood perfectly still beside the barn doors, his reddish coat glowing in the morning light. One ear twitched toward Ethan as if he already knew he was being watched. Ethan sighed. That horse again. The ranch foreman, Miguel, stepped beside him holding 2 coffee mugs. He was there all night, Miguel muttered quietly. Ethan took the mug. Still guarding that stupid box. Miguel nodded slowly. Won't let anybody near it. Ethan chuckled under his breath. A horse protecting a box. Sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. Miguel didn't laugh. There's something strange about it, he said. I've worked horses 40 years. I've never seen behavior like this. Ethan looked toward the barn again. Dusty lowered his head slightly but never moved away from the doorway. Watching. Always watching. The barn itself had been abandoned for years. Half the roof sagged inward, old tools rusted against the walls, and broken sunlight leaked through cracked wooden boards. Walter Cole used to keep injured horses there decades ago before building newer stables. Nobody visited anymore. Except Dusty. And apparently, whatever was inside that box mattered enough for the horse to defend it with his life. 3 ranch hands had already tried approaching it. 1 got kicked. Another was chased clear across the yard. The 3rd swore the horse looked at him with human eyes. Ethan thought they were being dramatic. Until he saw it himself. That afternoon, Ethan finally walked toward the barn carrying a bucket of feed. Dusty immediately stepped in front of the doorway. The stallion's muscles tightened. His nostrils flared. A warning. Easy, Ethan muttered. Dusty didn't move. Ethan took another step. The horse slammed 1 hoof into the dirt hard enough to shake dust into the air. Ethan froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Man and horse staring at each other in complete silence. Then something strange happened. Dusty looked briefly toward the back corner of the barn, toward the box. Almost like he was checking if it was still there. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What's so important in there? Dusty immediately snapped his attention back to Ethan and stepped forward protectively. That was enough. Ethan backed away slowly. And for the first time, he felt something crawl under his skin. Because this wasn't random behavior. The horse wasn't confused. He was protecting something deliberately. That night, A thunderstorm rolled over Black Hollow Ranch. Rain hammered the rooftops while lightning cracked across the hills. Ethan sat alone in his father's old office surrounded by unpaid bills and foreclosure notices. The bank had given him 60 days. If he couldn't save the ranch, everything would be gone. His father's legacy. The land. The horses. All of it. Frustrated, Ethan opened a drawer searching for paperwork when he found an old photograph underneath a stack of receipts. It showed Walter standing beside a younger Dusty nearly 20 years earlier. But there was something odd. Walter had one hand resting on a small wooden box. The same box. Ethan stared harder. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 4 words. Protect what matters most. A chill ran through him. Outside, thunder exploded. Then came the sound. A horse screaming. Ethan shot up instantly. He ran onto the porch and saw lightning illuminate the ranch for one terrifying second. Dusty was gone from the barn. And flames were rising near the equipment shed. Fire! Miguel shouted from across the yard. Workers sprinted through the rain carrying buckets while sparks flew into the stormy darkness. But Ethan barely noticed. Because through the smoke and rain, he saw Dusty running wildly toward the burning shed. Straight toward danger. Dusty! Ethan yelled. The stallion disappeared inside the smoke. Everyone panicked. Horses don't run into fire, someone shouted. But Dusty did. Like he was afraid someone might take it away. And that's when Ethan realized something that made his stomach tighten. This wasn't just an object. To that horse, this box meant everything. And somehow, his father had known it too. What Ethan still didn't understand was why. But before sunrise, he was finally going to open it. And what waited inside would uncover a secret buried for nearly 20 years. The storm finally began to fade just before dawn, but Black Hollow Ranch still smelled like smoke, wet earth, and burned timber. Ash floated through the cold morning air while exhausted ranch hands stomped across muddy ground checking the damage from the fire. Half the equipment shed had collapsed. Several tools were destroyed. One tractor was ruined completely. But nobody was talking about the fire anymore. They were all staring at the box. It sat in the center of the barn beneath a hanging lantern, soaked from rain, blackened with soot, and wrapped in old leather straps hardened by time. Dusty stood nearby despite his injuries, breathing heavily, his coat still damp and streaked with ash. Every few seconds, the stallion glanced nervously toward the box as though terrified someone might move it again. Ethan stood motionless across from him. His father's photograph remained folded inside his jacket pocket. Protect what matters most. Those words echoed in his head over and over. Miguel crouched beside the box carefully. You sure you want to do this now? Ethan nodded slowly. What if whatever's inside is why the horse has been acting like this all these years? Miguel asked quietly. Ethan looked toward Dusty. The stallion's ears pinned back slightly. Protective. Uneasy. Almost emotional. I think we're past turning back, Ethan whispered. One of the ranch hands grabbed a crowbar and slid it under the rusted latch. The old metal groaned loudly as the seal finally cracked open for the first time in decades. Dusty immediately stomped forward. Everyone jumped. Easy! Ethan shouted. But the horse didn't attack. He stopped inches from the box, trembling, breathing hard through his nostrils, staring down at it with an expression none of them could explain. Fear. Hope. Memory. Then Ethan slowly lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of old papers bundled together in cloth, several faded photographs, a silver pocket watch, and something wrapped carefully beneath an oilskin blanket. Ethan reached inside. His hands froze. No way, he breathed. He slowly pulled out a tiny pair of worn brown cowboy boots. Child-sized. The barn went silent. Miguel frowned. Whose are those? Ethan didn't answer. Because he recognized them immediately. His little brother's. Jacob Cole. The brother who disappeared 20 years ago. The brother nobody in town ever talked about anymore. The brother Ethan's father spent the rest of his life pretending never existed. A cold wave crashed through Ethan's chest. He dropped onto an old crate, staring at the boots in disbelief. That's impossible, he whispered. Miguel looked confused. Your father told me Jacob drowned in the river. That's what he told everyone. Dusty suddenly stepped closer to Ethan and lowered his head gently beside him. Not threatening, comforting. And for the first time since Ethan returned home, the horse allowed someone to touch the box without resistance. Ethan carefully dug deeper through the contents. More photographs, letters, newspaper clippings. Then he found a small leather journal tied with faded string. Walter Cole's handwriting covered the front. If anything happens to me, Ethan deserves the truth. Ethan's pulse hammered. His hand shook as he opened the first page. The lantern flickered softly while rain tapped against the barn roof overhead. And then Ethan began to read. Jacob was never supposed to be near the river that day. Ethan swallowed hard. I lied to everyone after the accident because I was afraid of losing both my sons. Ethan blamed himself for daring Jacob to ride alone. I blamed myself for not stopping him. But the truth is far worse than anyone knows. Ethan's breathing became shallow. Dusty stood perfectly still beside him. Watching. Almost listening. The horse found Jacob first. Ethan's eyes widened. He kept reading. 3 miles north of the riverbank, Dusty refused to come home that night. I followed him into the forest and found Jacob trapped beneath a fallen tree after the storm. He was alive. Barely breathing, but alive. Miguel whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan's entire body went numb. For 20 years, he believed his little brother died because of him. 20 years of guilt. 20 years of nightmares. And now the truth was unraveling inside an old barn while a horse stood guard beside them. Ethan continued reading. Jacob begged me not to take him home. The words blurred for a moment through Ethan's tears. He said he wanted to leave Black Hollow forever. He was tired of the fighting. Tired of hearing Ethan and me scream at each other every night. He said he felt invisible. Ethan lowered the journal slowly. His chest hurt. Because it was true. The ranch had been a battlefield back then. Walter drank too much after his wife died. Ethan rebelled constantly. And Jacob. Jacob stayed quiet through all of it. Too quiet. Miguel sat down nearby silently while Ethan forced himself to continue. I made the worst decision of my life that night. Instead of bringing Jacob home immediately, I helped him disappear. My cousin Samuel took him east under a different name. I convinced myself it was temporary, but the years passed and shame buried me deeper every day. The lantern crackled softly. Outside, thunder rumbled far away in the hills. Ethan's voice broke as he read the final line aloud. Dusty never forgave me for lying. Silence. Heavy silence. Then suddenly everything made sense. The box. The guarding. The obsession. The horse remembered. Dusty had witnessed the entire night Jacob disappeared. And somehow, in the strange loyal way horses understand pain and memory, he spent 20 years protecting the only proof Jacob ever existed. Ethan wiped tears from his face angrily. All this time, he whispered. He thought about every argument with his father. Every cold dinner. Every year believing Jacob died because of him. Walter had carried the truth alone until it destroyed him. And Dusty had carried it too. Then the stallion let out a deep, powerful neigh that echoed across the hills. Not fearful. Not angry. Hopeful. Everyone turned toward the road. A truck was slowly approaching through the morning fog. And when it stopped near the gate, a man stepped out holding an old photograph in his hand. The moment Dusty saw him, the horse nearly tore the barn doors off trying to reach him. The entire barn froze. Dusty exploded forward with a force nobody could stop. The stallion ripped the lead rope from the fence post and charged across the muddy yard toward the ranch gate, neighing wildly. Ranch hands jumped out of the way as the massive horse thundered through puddles and smoke from the burned shed. Ethan ran after him. The stranger standing beside the truck looked stunned at first, but the moment he saw Dusty racing toward him, his expression shattered completely. "No," the man whispered. Dusty reached him seconds later. What happened next left everyone speechless. The powerful stallion slowed at the last second and pressed his head against the man's chest so gently it looked almost human. Dusty trembled visibly, breathing hard, nuzzling the stranger's shoulder as if he'd found someone he'd been searching for his entire life. And then the man began to cry. Not quietly, not politely. He broke apart right there in the mud. Ethan stopped 20 feet away, unable to move. Because even through the beard, the age, and the years, he recognized him. Jacob. His little brother looked older now, worn down by life, his dark hair streaked with grey despite being only 34. His flannel jacket was faded. His eyes looked exhausted. But they were still the same eyes Ethan remembered from childhood. Jacob wrapped both arms around Dusty's neck tightly. "I came back for you," he whispered through tears. The horse let out a low trembling sound Ethan had never heard before. For a moment, nobody spoke. The wind moved softly across the ranch while the brothers stared at each other across 20 years of silence. Finally, Jacob looked up. His eyes met Ethan's. And all the emotions buried for decades came crashing back at once. Pain, guilt, love, regret. "I didn't think you'd still be here," Jacob said quietly. Ethan's throat tightened. "You're alive." It was the only thing he could manage to say. Jacob nodded slowly. Dusty remained glued to his side like he was terrified Jacob might disappear again. Miguel and the ranch hands wisely backed away, giving the brothers space while tension hung heavily in the cold morning air. Ethan stepped closer carefully. For years, he imagined this moment differently. He imagined anger, questions, maybe even hatred. But standing there now, seeing his little brother alive after mourning him for half his life, none of those things mattered anymore. Without warning, Ethan grabbed Jacob and pulled him into a crushing hug. Jacob froze in shock for half a second before hugging him back just as tightly. And suddenly both brothers were crying openly in the middle of the ranch yard while Dusty stood beside them nudging their shoulders like he'd been waiting 20 years for this exact moment. "You idiot," Ethan laughed through tears. "You absolute idiot." Jacob smiled painfully. "I know. The reunion would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But reality hit quickly. Because the ranch was collapsing. And Jacob had returned carrying secrets of his own. A few hours later, the brothers sat inside the old ranch house kitchen while coffee steamed untouched between them. Dusty refused to leave the porch outside the window, constantly watching the room like a loyal guardian. Jacob noticed Ethan glancing at the horse repeatedly. "He slept outside every motel I stayed at after I left," Jacob said softly. Ethan frowned. "What?" Jacob leaned back slowly. "The night Dad sent me away, Dusty followed the truck for almost 6 miles. Ethan stared. He escaped every fence Samuel put him behind. Every single time. Outside, Dusty paced quietly near the porch steps. Jacob smiled sadly. "Eventually Samuel gave up and let him travel with us." "You're telling me that horse crossed half the country with you?" Jacob nodded. "For almost 2 years." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. Jacob's expression darkened slightly. "But eventually Dad came for him." The room fell quiet again. "Dad said the ranch was falling apart without Dusty," Jacob continued. "Said people were asking too many questions. He promised he'd take care of him until I came back." Ethan remembered that period vividly now. Walter drinking heavily. Dusty becoming aggressive. The horse standing near the road every evening staring toward the horizon. Waiting. "He missed you," Ethan whispered. Jacob looked out the window at Dusty. "I know." For a few moments neither brother spoke. Then Ethan finally asked the question haunting him since reading the journal. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" Jacob's face changed instantly. Pain. Deep pain. He rubbed his hands together nervously before answering. "At first, I thought Dad was right. I thought leaving would stop the fighting." Ethan looked down silently. "But after a while," Jacob continued, "I was ashamed." "Of what?" "Of leaving you behind." The words hit Ethan hard. Jacob swallowed carefully. "I heard Mom died and everything fell apart after that. I knew you and Dad blamed yourselves already. If I came back," he shook his head, "I thought it would destroy what little was left." Ethan stared at the table quietly. For years, Both brothers suffered alone, believing they were protecting each other. And Walter carried the crushing weight of the lie until it killed him. The tragedy suddenly felt even bigger than before. Dusty snorted softly outside the window. Jacob smiled faintly. He used to do that whenever I got upset. You talk about him like he's a person. Jacob laughed weakly. Sometimes I think he is. That afternoon, Ethan showed Jacob the foreclosure notices. The bank wanted the ranch within 60 days. Jacob walked silently through the property afterward, taking in the broken fences, damaged barns, and exhausted workers. The ranch barely resembled the place they grew up. If anything happens to me, don't let them find the north pasture. Ethan looked up sharply. What the hell is the north pasture? But Jacob was already staring toward the distant hills beyond the ranch. Terrified. Because suddenly, he remembered something buried deep in childhood. Something their father never wanted discovered. And whatever was hidden out there, Dusty had been protecting it too. The sun disappeared behind the mountains as cold wind swept across Black Hollow Ranch, but nobody moved. Ethan still held the photograph tightly in his hand. If anything happens to me, don't let them find the north pasture. The words felt heavier now. Dangerous. Jacob looked pale, staring toward the distant hills beyond the ranch fences. His breathing uneven, like old memories were clawing their way back to the surface. Miguel stepped closer carefully. You know something. Jacob hesitated. Dusty suddenly walked beside him and nudged his arm firmly, almost urging him forward. And that's when Jacob whispered the sentence that changed everything again. There's another box. Silence swallowed the yard. Ethan frowned. What? Jacob looked toward the northern hills. Dad buried something out there years ago. I saw him do it once. Buried what? I don't know, Jacob admitted. I was only 14. The banker, Mr. Callahan, quickly interrupted. This is irrelevant. The foreclosure documents are already prepared. But Ethan noticed fear in the man's eyes now. Real fear. And Dusty noticed it too. The stallion stepped directly between Callahan and the ranch road again, forcing the banker backward. Callahan snapped nervously. Get that horse away from me. Ethan ignored him completely. What was Dad hiding out there? He demanded. Jacob rubbed his face anxiously. I don't remember everything. Just, one night Dad took a truck into the north pasture after midnight. He thought everyone was asleep. Dusty pawed the dirt. Hard. Impatient. Miguel narrowed his eyes. You think the horse remembers where? Jacob looked at Dusty. The stallion stared toward the hills instantly. That was answer enough. 20 minutes later, 4 ranch trucks bounced across rough terrain beneath the darkening sky. Ethan drove the lead vehicle while Miguel sat beside him gripping a flashlight. Behind them, Jacob rode horseback on Dusty despite everyone insisting the stallion should rest after the fire. But Dusty refused to stay behind. The horse moved with intense focus, ears locked forward, guiding them deeper into the northern pasture where old fence posts leaned crookedly through tall grass. Storm clouds still lingered overhead. Everything about the place felt abandoned. Forgotten. Ethan glanced toward Jacob riding beside them. You really don't remember what Dad buried? Jacob shook his head slowly. Just that he was terrified someone would find it. And Callahan? Jacob looked grim. Dad argued with him constantly back then. That made Ethan uneasy. Because Walter always claimed the bank only got involved after ranch profits collapsed. But what if that wasn't true? What if the ranch had been targeted long before that? Dusty suddenly stopped. The stallion froze beside an enormous dead oak tree near the edge of a dried creek bed. Then he began pawing violently at the ground. Ethan killed the truck engine. Everyone climbed out silently. Dusty kept digging. Faster. Dirt flew behind him while the horse snorted urgently. Miguel whispered, Dear God. Jacob slid off the saddle slowly. This is the spot. The ranch hands grabbed shovels from the trucks and started digging beneath the tree roots. The deeper they went, the more nervous Callahan became behind them. You people are making a mistake, he snapped. Nobody listened. 5 minutes later, One shovel struck wood. Thunk. Everyone froze. Miguel knelt quickly, brushing away wet dirt until the top of a large metal chest emerged beneath the ground. Ethan's pulse hammered. Dusty stepped closer immediately, breathing hard, watching every movement. The chest was old, rusted, and locked tight with heavy chains. "What the hell is this?" Miguel muttered. Callahan suddenly turned toward his SUV parked farther back on the trail. "I'm leaving." Ethan grabbed his arm instantly. "Oh no you don't." Callahan's calm professional mask finally cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing," he hissed. Ethan stepped closer. "Then explain it." For several tense seconds, the only sound was wind moving through dead grass. Then Callahan laughed bitterly. "Walter should have destroyed this years ago." A chill spread through the group. Jacob whispered, "Destroyed what?" Callahan looked toward the chest with pure hatred. "Proof." Miguel cut the chains with bolt cutters from the truck. The metal snapped open. And slowly, Ethan lifted the lid. Inside sat stacks of yellowed documents sealed in waterproof bags. Property deeds, contracts, maps, photographs. And beneath all of them, bundles of cash. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. Everyone stared in shock. "What is this?" Ethan breathed. Jacob picked up one of the maps. His face drained completely. "Oil." Miguel blinked. "What?" Jacob unfolded the map wider across the truck hood under flashlight beams. Large red markings covered the northern pasture. Drilling estimates, survey reports, corporate signatures, and one sentence circled heavily in red ink. Estimated reserves exceed $200 million. The world seemed to stop spinning for Ethan. The ranch wasn't worthless. It was sitting on massive oil reserves the entire time. Callahan exhaled sharply like a man finally cornered after years of hiding. 22 years ago, he admitted quietly, an energy company discovered oil beneath Black Hollow Ranch. Ethan stared at him furiously. And your father refused to sell." Miguel shook his head in disbelief. "So the bank destroyed him." Callahan looked away silently. That silence answered everything. The foreclosure, the debt, the pressure, the endless loans Walter could never escape. It had all been intentional. They wanted the ranch cheap. And Walter hid the evidence before they could steal it. "Control that horse," he warned. Ethan stood beside Dusty now. "No." The wind howled across the hills. The chest remained open between them. Proof of everything. The lies. The stolen future. The secret Walter died protecting. And now, under the moonlight, Ethan realized something terrifying. The fight for Black Hollow Ranch had only just begun. The wind tore across the north pasture while both sides stood frozen beneath the moonlight. Dusty remained planted in front of Ethan and Jacob, muscles tense, ears pinned back, protecting the chest like a soldier guarding the final truth of a fallen kingdom. The oil company men exchanged nervous glances. Nobody wanted to be the first person to test a furious 1,000-pound stallion. The leader stepped forward slowly, forcing confidence into his voice. "You don't understand how powerful the people behind this are." Ethan didn't blink. "You mean the people who destroyed my father's life?" The man smirked coldly. "Your father destroyed himself." Jacob clenched his fists instantly, but before he could move, Dusty stomped the ground so violently the sound echoed across the pasture. A warning. And somehow, everyone understood it. The leader's smile faded. Callahan suddenly stepped forward nervously. "This has gone too far." The oil company men looked at him sharply. "You said the evidence was gone," one of them snapped. Miguel's eyes widened. "You were working with them." Callahan looked sick. "For years," he admitted quietly. "The bank wanted the ranch to fail so the land could be acquired through foreclosure. Walter kept refusing every offer." Ethan felt rage burn through his chest. "All this time?" Callahan nodded miserably. "Your father knew they'd never stop coming." Jacob stared at the chest, shaking his head slowly. "That's why he buried it." "No," Ethan said quietly. Everyone looked at him. He buried it because he knew someday would need proof. Dusty turned his head slightly toward Ethan at those words. Almost approvingly. The oil company leader lost patience. Enough. He motioned toward the chest. Take it. Two men stepped forward cautiously. Dusty exploded again. The stallion charged with terrifying speed, forcing both men backward as hooves slammed into the dirt inches from their feet. One man fell hard against the truck while the others scrambled away shouting, "Jesus Christ! That horse is insane." But Dusty wasn't attacking wildly. He was defending deliberately. Protecting the brothers. Protecting the evidence. Protecting the ranch. Just like he had for 20 years. And suddenly Ethan understood something that hit him harder than any revelation that night. Dusty never guarded the box because of what was inside. He guarded it because of what it represented. Family. Truth. Home. The things Walter failed to protect himself. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed across the hills. Everyone turned. Sheriff vehicles raced up the pasture road in a cloud of dust. Miguel smiled grimly. I called them when those trucks showed up. The oil company men cursed under their breath. Within minutes, deputies surrounded the area while Sheriff Daniels climbed out of the lead SUV holding a flashlight. What the hell's going on out here? Ethan handed him the documents silently. Daniels flipped through the papers slowly. Then his face darkened. Well, he muttered, this explains a lot. The oil company leader tried stepping forward confidently. Sheriff, these documents are private corporate property. Daniels looked up sharply. No, he said coldly. They're evidence. Everything changed after that. The sheriff's department launched an investigation within days. Hidden financial records exposed decades of corruption between the bank, local officials, and the oil company. Walter Cole had spent years fighting people far more powerful than anyone realized. And he fought alone. Until now. News spread fast across Montana. The story of the horse protecting the hidden evidence captured national attention almost overnight. Reporters flooded Black Hollow Ranch. Headlines called Dusty the Guardian Stallion. Videos of the scarred chestnut horse standing beside the buried chest spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched. Millions cried. And strangely, millions understood. Because deep down, people wanted to believe loyalty like that still existed in the world. 1 week later, Ethan stood outside the barn watching volunteers repair fences across the ranch. Donations had poured in from strangers around the country after the story broke online. Some sent money. Some sent feed. Some simply sent letters thanking the family for sharing the story. For the first time in decades, Black Hollow Ranch wasn't dying anymore. It was healing. Jacob walked up beside him carrying 2 coffees. Dusty followed closely behind like always. You see this one? Jacob asked, holding up a phone. Ethan laughed softly. Another news interview request. 3 movie producers. Ethan nearly spit out his coffee. Jacob grinned for the first time in years. The brothers stood quietly watching the ranch workers for a while. Then Ethan finally asked the question lingering in his mind. You staying this time? Jacob looked toward the horizon. For a moment, Ethan thought he might leave again. But then Dusty gently nudged Jacob's shoulder. Jacob smiled. Yeah, he said softly. I think I'm finally home. The weeks passed quickly after that. Charges were filed against multiple executives connected to the land scheme. The foreclosure vanished completely. The oil rights remained legally under the Cole family's control, but Ethan shocked everyone with his decision. He refused to drill. You sure? Miguel asked one evening. Ethan nodded while watching horses graze beneath the sunset. My father sacrificed everything protecting this land. Dusty stood nearby calmly chewing hay. I'm not destroying it now. Instead, the brothers transformed part of the ranch into a rescue sanctuary for abused and abandoned horses. And Dusty became the heart of it all. People traveled from across the country just to see him. But the old stallion never cared about the cameras. Or the fame. Or the attention. He only cared about his people. Especially Jacob. Every morning before sunrise, The brothers would find Dusty standing outside Jacob's cabin waiting patiently like he was making sure he hadn't disappeared again. The stallion stopped near the old oak tree in the distance, the place where the chest had been buried. For a long moment, he simply stood there quietly beneath the falling snow, watching the land, watching the home he protected for half his life. Then he turned calmly toward the barn lights glowing warm against the winter darkness, and walked home.